This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Brett Young. Change the game with BY7204LL, Brett Young's newest canola hybrid with Liberty Link technology.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, September 17th, and I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And today's show, thank you very much, is brought to you by Nufarm and their two fall-applied soil-active herbicides, Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ. And later on today's show, you're going to hear a product spotlight with Courtney Stephenson. She's going to explain these two products, why they're different, how they're different, and how best to work them into your fall fieldwork. A quick note, and I think this is super cool, and so I hope you do too. This is a product, or these products, are fall applied but spring active. And frankly, for many in the prairies where moisture is limiting and those weeds really do get a jump on the crop, fall action can lead to a much happier spring. So we will talk with Courtney in the product spotlight in our third segment today. But of course, we've got a huge show lined up for you today. Amber Bell, my colleague out of Alberta, is in conversation with Tracy Herbert with BCRC. She's going to bring us all the news of the inaugural Canadian Cow-Calf Survey. So what this survey is, what we learned, what we were hoping to learn, and sort of what comes next. So check that out right after the break. Later in the show, in case you missed it, we did hear on Friday that India is in fact extending the amount of time in the calendar year where Canadian peas can be imported into the country tariff-free. So if you remember, back in the spring, we did receive word that until October 31st, yellow peas could move into the country without a tariff being applied. That has now been extended to December 31st of this year. So an extra couple months to ship yellow peas into India, an incredibly important market, obviously, for yellow peas. So I've got Greg Cherewyk. He's the president of Pulse Canada. He's going to join me from the Pulse and Special Crops Convention happening in Winnipeg this week. He's going to join me to talk about if this was a surprise, whether or not we see this spurring a lot more movement into India as an export market in these few months that we will have tariff-free, and if it may be extended even further. So looking forward to that conversation. Then at the tail end of the show, I do have some news. So I'm going to cover a couple tidbits that we did get across the desk today. As always, and I know we do this a lot, and I know you're maybe listening to the podcast or in the middle of the field, in the combine. I know it's a busy time of year, but we do a lot of writing, video, audio, all that extra background info that we don't always have time for on the radio show also lives at RealAgriculture.com. So head on over there if you're looking for more info on any of the stories we talk about. We've got all the details there. So, today, of course, we'll be covering some of those things, including the outcome of last night's by-elections, and we did get some big news on the GATE project happening out of Winnipeg. So check that out as well. I'll bring you what I can later. Then, as always, and maybe you're a little tired of me bringing clips of the agronomists onto this show, but I gotta tell you, I love this part of my job. Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, there's a group of us, agronomists, farmers, people from across Canada, the U.S., and really around the world that get together 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube or on realagriculture.com/agronomists. The YouTube feed will be live there as well. And we tackle a topic. We've got some great guests. Next week, we're talking about soil pH and the role that soil pH plays in nutrient availability. But last night, we talked all about micronutrients. So check out at the end of the show, I've got a couple clips from that, talking about zinc, talking about copper, and that's Lyle Cowell and Aaron Breimer joined me for the agronomist last night. So we'll hear a clip from that at the end of today's show. As always, I really do, and here the entire team at Real Agriculture really appreciates your feedback, your questions, your story ideas, your fascinating people that you want on the show. So zip us an email. I am at lsmith@realagriculture.com. You can drop us a voicemail at 1-855-776-6147, or of course, find us across social media. We are on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, YouTube, you name it, we're there. You can drop us a message and we'll get in touch with you. All right. Of course, a big thank you again to Nufarm and to Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ for sponsoring today's show. Super excited to have them on board as show sponsors. And let's take a break and come back with the conversation on the cow-calf survey right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
Time for a product spotlight with the Canadian Canola Growers Association. We're joined now by Dave Gallant. Who is CCGA and why are we talking about cash advance?
Well, the Canadian Canola Growers Association has been around for 40 years. The cash advance program itself has been around for over 50 years. It gives farmers access to cash flow for their inventory without having to sell. Big benefits of the program: the first $250,000 this year is interest-free, and CCGA offers the program on over 50 different products. So we do all the grains and oilseeds, livestock, so cattle, bison, hogs, goats, as well as honey. This program you only pay as you deliver your product. So there's no monthly payments scheduled. You pay when you have cash flow from your product. And the third big advantage, the only collateral, especially at this time of the year, is the grain itself.
How do they learn more? How do they get started?
Well, the easiest way is you can go to ccga.ca. If you really want to understand it, you can call us at our 1-800 number, 1-866-745-2256.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by the pre-emergent soil active herbicides Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ from Nufarm. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds. Spray this fall for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control next spring. Find out more about Nufarm products at nufarm.ca. All right, we go now to a report from Amber Bell. She's in conversation with Tracy Herbert of the BCRC talking about the inaugural Canadian Cow-Calf Survey.
Welcome, Tracy. It's fantastic to have you. I'm really excited to talk to you today because we're going to talk about the inaugural Canadian Cow-Calf Survey and the results that were just released, right?
Yeah, and my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to talk about these results too.
Okay, so first, why don't we just get started off on what the inaugural Canadian Cow-Calf Survey is? It's a bit of a mouthful, so tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, so it's the tool that we at the BCRC use to gather the information that we need so that we can make informed decisions on where best to spend producers' checkoff dollars on research and development projects, right? Because when we have factual information on the performance of herds in different regions, the practices that are being used, and then producers' reasons behind them, then we can see the greatest opportunities and issues and focus on them to meet the needs of different types of operations across the country. But it's not just us that are able to use those results. There's lots of people working in extension, different industry groups and provincial governments. And so it gives them the opportunity to also identify opportunities and barriers to better profitability for their beef clients.
That makes a lot of sense. And it is Canadian. So who exactly are the respondents to this? Who does this typically go out to?
Well, we had 600 Canadian farmers and ranchers with cow-calf beef herds complete the survey, and we're very appreciative of them for taking the time to share their information with us anonymously because, of course, surveys are only as good as the honesty and the volume of the answers that we get. But of course, it was promoted nationally, and 9 provinces are represented in the results. And the percentage of respondents and the number of breeding females that they have are really quite similar to the national herd, right? So the numbers that we're seeing in the ag census. So we're happy with the representation. Of course, anytime you're doing surveys, the more responses, the better. But we did get a high percentage of beef producers, a higher percentage than would be expected with national consumer voter polls and that type of thing. So pleased with the representation provided in the data. And, the reason it came to be is because past surveys were done in different regions, right? So there was the Western Canadian cow-calf survey that happened in 2013 and 17. There was one in Ontario, another in Atlantic. But merging those together and working with the people who had done that gives us the opportunity to ask the same questions in the same way across the country, so we can create those benchmarks and then really see those trends over time.
That's incredible. And I think one of the things that I really love about the ranching industry in Canada is people are typically pretty open to sharing what they're doing and what their information is. So that's great. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the survey results were? Maybe just give us a really brief overview.
Yeah, well, it asked 74 questions about the 2022 breeding season through to the 23 weaned calf crop. And so it took producers about 45 minutes to answer. So we've got lots of information to work with, but, a few that I'll highlight are around the good news stories that there are. So calf death loss numbers are lower than we've seen before. In 2023, calf death loss in the first 24 hours of life averaged just over 2% in calves born from cows and 3.7% in calves born from heifers. Low stress weaning techniques are up, and that's the case in both Eastern and Western Canada. So that means that more calves are less susceptible to getting bovine respiratory disease. So those stats are about 55 to 60%, depending on the province in Eastern Canada, are using low stress weaning techniques, which is up a lot from what the Atlantic survey showed us 8 years ago. It was 40% then, so up quite a bit. And then Western Canadian provinces range between 44 and 54% using low stress weaning techniques in the last year. And then for those producers who aren't, they indicated it's because of a lack of time, labor, and facilities, or a lack of economic incentive. Those are the major reasons for doing traditional separation. A couple others that I'll mention is more producers are feed testing and balancing their rations. So that's trending in the right direction. More are scoring their females for their body condition and then making management decisions based on those condition scores. And preg checking is trending up in East and Western Canadian herds, as well as use of pain mitigation during castration and dehorning. And then one that producers always find really interesting is conception rates, of course. So 7.4% of cows nationally were open and 11% of heifers were open last year. And while that national average hasn't changed very much, it does vary a lot by region, of course. It's lowest in Quebec and the Maritimes and highest in Manitoba.
Wow, so there's a lot of regional differences there to some extent. And it's really neat to see some of those best management practices trending upward. Do you feel that the survey results on some of this is going to help guide the people in Extension on, kind of where do we want to direct some of these efforts, especially when it comes to those best management practices?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we can tell you how we at the BCRC have used results from past surveys. So ones that were done, that Western Canadian cow-calf survey that I mentioned that was done about 8 years ago was the last one. So it showed us that about 7% of heifers and about 5% of cows in Western Canada were losing their calves before weaning, and half of those deaths were happening in the first 24 hours. And so now that we knew that, we got to work with veterinarians and producers and other extension experts to develop really simple, practical resources to help cow-calf producers increase the odds of those calves surviving. And so all those can be found at beefresearch.ca/calf911. And so that's just kind of shine some light on one example of how we and others in Extension can use those results to figure out where the greatest risks and opportunities are to focus our efforts, and then the strategies to go about them that might be most effective, considering that we've got information on the reasons behind what people are doing or not, and where, we've got the greatest opportunity to move the needle.
Right. And speaking of opportunity to move needle, so one of the questions in there I noticed is on water testing. And I personally, looking at it, I'm like, that's probably an area where a lot of people don't do water testing. Like, I've never done water testing for my herd. So can you speak into that a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about those results?
Yeah, that is one that varied quite a bit regionally. So the lowest rates of water testing were in BC. 76% of respondents there told us that they never test their water. And the most amount of water testing is happening in Saskatchewan. So 43% there told us that they never do. 36% said they have done it once in the last 3 years. And about 14% said they test their water every year. And it's important because, calves that drink more water, eat more, grow more, less chance of disease, less chance of issues because of high sulfates, all those types of things. And sometimes those issues are under the radar, and you won't know about them unless you get, the factual information by getting those water test results. I suspect that the testing rates are highest in Saskatchewan because, there's known to be bad water quality. They've been dealing with drought for a number of years, especially in the southern part of Saskatchewan, but they also have more extension capacity there. So producers in Saskatchewan are really fortunate that there are livestock and feed extension specialists employed by the provincial government who, they can drop off their water samples at a regional office and then get those results and then talk to an extension specialist about what to do about those results and how to make decisions based on them. Unfortunately, that support isn't available to producers in other regions. Provincial extension capacity is quite low in most provinces aside from Saskatchewan. And so we at BCRC are working with experts and organizations across the country to collaboratively develop extension resources related to water quality and water testing to make them freely available on beefresearch.ca/water. And I expect that, there's some content there now, and I suspect all these new resources will get added there over the next year.
That's incredible. And do you have any words of encouragement for producers as we kind of go into this winter season?
There's more things to do in a day than there are hours, and we recognize people are doing their best. Sometimes you don't know where the greatest opportunities might be on your own operation. And so I will plug one of the tools that we've got on our website. It's the cow-calf production indicators tool. And so that is where you can plug in, about 15 different numbers on your operation, and it will show you how your own herd compares to industry targets and as well as the benchmarks from this last survey results. So you can compare your own herd to whether, the Western Canadian average or the Eastern Canadian average, depending where you are. And then it will highlight green if you're, meeting those targets and doing great, nothing to worry about. Or if, you're lower on some, it'll highlight those and let you know where you've got your own greatest opportunities for improvement.
That's amazing. And you guys do have a wonderful website with a lot of great resources. So thank you for that. Well, thank you very much for joining us. And that was Tracy Herbert on Real Agriculture.
Thank you to Amber Bell and to Tracy Herbert for that interview. We're going to hop now to today's product spotlight with Courtney Stephenson of Nufarm. We're going to learn all about the fall applied spring weed control from Nufarm, featuring Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ. We'll be back with that right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
We got a product spotlight with Kate Hyatt, the marketing portfolio lead for DeKalb. Let's talk about the DeKalb Coat of Farms.
Coat of Farms is an initiative to celebrate the partnership between DeKalb Seed and the farmers that are choosing it. The way that Coat of Farms works, it's a farmer-driven, artificial intelligence enhanced line of DeKalb swag. So it's an interface on an iPad or on your phone or your computer. You answer a series of questions that help drill down to what represents you. And then a 3D rendered jacket gets created.
So how long does this go on for?
That's a great question. So contest runs from August 27th through to October 15th. After October 15th, there's going to be a contest where 10 of the coats will be available to be won through draws and from the people that participated.
That is great. DeKalbCoatOfFarms.ca.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now is Courtney Stephenson. She's the portfolio manager for Canada with Nufarm, based in Alberta. Courtney, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Lyndsey?
I'm doing well. This is an exciting time of year because it's one of my favorite times. It's time to kill some weeds, and specifically fall weeds. And I don't think it's necessarily top of mind, so let's change that. As harvest starts to wrap up, what could farmers be doing this fall to get ahead of next spring?
Sure, that sounds great, Lyndsey. So at Nufarm, we like to say that spring starts now. And so, as growers are either harvesting or wrapping up harvesting, because I know it's at a lot of different stages in Western Canada, that it's important to start thinking about applying a herbicide, a soil active herbicide like Valtera EZ or Fierce EZ, so that they can get ahead of their weeds for the next spring. So these products are not fall control products, but they're spring control products. And so the nice thing about applying in the fall is it's going to offer a grower some flexibility and some time management when they're pressed for time in the spring.
Okay, so this is a key part, I think, that's really important to think about, is we're applying in the fall, but really this is to get a jump on spring growth of these weeds. So what are some of the benefits of applying in the fall versus the spring?
Well, one of the nice things about applying in the fall is that Fierce EZ and Valtera EZ are activated by moisture. So it's a great way to use snow to your advantage. And so the snowpack will activate these products. It's a little bit nicer in that you don't have to incorporate these products. You can just apply them with your sprayer. One of the things that is also a benefit is that by applying in the fall, a grower has 8 weeks of activity in the spring. And so you're going to be preserving your moisture and fertility in the spring, which sometimes is hard to come by controlling your weeds at that time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, and it also, of course, as you mentioned, no need to incorporate, which saves some time as well. If, let's say, and as you mentioned, harvest is maybe all over the place, depending on where you are in the prairies right now, but as harvest wraps up, is there a timeline that I should be aiming to get this product down? Like, is there such thing as too early or too late?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. So, in Alberta, it's supposed to be 34 degrees this weekend. So I feel like, we're not going to be applying these products for a little while yet, but you need to apply these products when the soil temperature is 10 degrees Celsius or lower. The thing with that is that if you apply them before that, the soil microbes can break down the product, and so you're going to have less activity in the spring. If you, again, like I did say, if you're looking for fall weed control, because I know there has been some late precipitation events and some late rains. So if you're looking for fall weed control, because you've got weeds coming up now, you can apply Black Hockey BO, do a tank mix with your Valtera EZ or Fierce EZ, and get a jump on some weeds that are coming up this fall.
Okay, so that sort of covers our bases that obviously when it's still summer-like temperatures, not the right time to go. We need to wait a little bit longer, which I think if we're a fall weed control kind of farmer, we probably are comfortable with that. But good to know that, there is such thing as too early. All right, now, is there a particular sort of weed spectrum that these products will do best on, or what weed spectrum am I targeting if I'm using Valtera or Fierce?
Sure. You're going to be able to control a lot of your broadleaf weeds, so chickweed, seedling dandelions, redroot pigweed, volunteer canola. However, one of the nice things about Fierce EZ is that it can act as a resistance management tool because it offers suppression on grassy weeds with group 15, which is really great ahead of wheat because there's often challenges with grassy weeds in that crop being resistant to some of the actives that are used more regularly.
For farmers who have questions, agronomists that have questions on how best to use Valtera and Fierce, where can they go to find more information?
Sure. The first best stop would be to talk to your local retailer, or if you'd like to do a little bit of research online, you can always go to nufarm.ca/fall apply.
All right, Courtney, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Whether you're in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, running your own farm operation, operating a company in ag or food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, so it is time for Tuesdays with Lyndsey, and today's show is brought to you by pre-emergent soil active herbicides Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ from Nufarm. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds, spray this fall for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control next spring, and find out more about Nufarm products at nufarm.ca. Joining me now on the line, live from the Pulse and Special Crops Convention in Winnipeg, it's Greg Cherewyk. He's the president of Pulse Canada. Hello, Greg. How are you?
Hi, Lyndsey. Good to talk to you. I'm doing great.
Okay, so we are going to talk about India's move yesterday on the tariffs, extending the tariff-free time till December. But just to touch on that, you are at the Pulse and Special Crops Convention. Will these tariffs be the talk of the convention, or what else is on the docket?
Well, there's certainly going to be talked about at the convention. I mean, we have 360, I can't remember the exact figure, and it changes on the hour, but it's over 360 delegates from over 20 countries around the world coming to Winnipeg this week. They again arriving yesterday. They're arriving today. Unfortunately, it's raining here in Winnipeg, and we're hoping to get them out on the golf course here shortly. So hopefully we can find a window of clear sky to enjoy a game of golf. But this convention is one of the big ones for the pulse industry. There's a global pulse industry event held by the GPC, and that moves around the world each year. And the Canadian Pulse and Special Crop Convention is also the other big one. So it's the one people look forward to. And in this business, it's all about relationships. It's all about connecting buyers and sellers. So they love getting together at these types of things. It's about networking. And of course, as you mentioned, it's about understanding where the markets are heading and listening to market outlooks. So the most popular sessions on the agenda, of course, are the pea and lentil market outlooks in particular. And of course, some of the special crop outlooks are also important too. But the talk this year definitely will be around the decision that we heard on Friday, which is that India will be lifting the restrictions and extending, actually, the lifting of restrictions on pea imports from the previous deadline of October 31st through to December 31st. So I'm personally really looking forward to hearing some of the discussion around that. We haven't had a chance yet to talk to too many people involved directly in the trade. We have some officials coming from India later this morning. I'll actually be heading to the airport shortly to be picking them up. So looking forward to having some conversations with those folks to get the real detail behind the decision. But I'm happy to talk a little bit about it with you today too.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is one of those, the big question really is, I guess we'll start with, did you have an inkling this may be coming? Was this a surprise? Or was this expected, or is this very, very unexpected?
I'm not sure too many people really expected this news. I mean, perhaps maybe they didn't expect to hear about it on September 13th. It's quite difficult to get a good read on what's influencing policy change and the timing of announcements in India, as you can imagine. But, there are a few things that we do watch for. And if you look at that information and think about it, it may not be unreasonable to understand what's driving some of these things. So, for example, what stands out to us right now is how food price inflation might be impacting these policy decisions. So overall, food price inflation in India has remained quite high, in and around the 6% mark and even higher in rural areas. But the key is pulse price inflation is stubbornly high. It was 13.6% in August, and that's the 15th straight month of double-digit price increases on pulses. So, to think that the lifting of restrictions first occurred back in December of 2023, and now it's going to be extended all the way through to the end of December 2024, and understanding that pulse price inflation has remained in that double-digit range throughout that time frame. Again, it's not unreasonable to think that the extension of that policy is linked to the government of India's mandate to keep these staple sources of protein available and affordable, 365 days a year. But, one of the other things that we think about is, of course, the politics, because there's always an element of political context that needs to be factored into this. And right now there's 6 state assembly elections between June and November. And, governments around the world are seized with affordability, cost of living challenges. And obviously we know that food is a big contributor to rising costs to consumers. So, controlling food prices as people head to the polls, that's likely a factor as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of volume might we see as far as crop movement with this tariff exemption being extended? Are we anticipating a lot more pea crop moving to India because of this?
I knew you were going to ask me this, Lyndsey. I don't want to make a projection for you because, like I said, over the course of the next 2 days, we're going to have the experts weigh in on that. In fact, on Wednesday afternoon, we have the Pea Market Outlook session, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. So I'm really interested to hear what the people who actually do the deals think is going to move this year. I mean, what I can tell you is that India imported over 800,000 tons of yellow peas from Canada in 2023-24 as that restriction was lifted. So, in roughly, I would say 6 months, we know we were able to move 800,000 tons of product into India. So the question will be, what is India in the market for in terms of overall volumes over the course of this next 4 months? And how much of that is going to be, subject to intense competition with Russia? How much will the Kharif or summer season crop, which will be harvested in October, influence the overall volumes they're interested in importing? So I don't know is my short answer to this, and I'd be happy to talk with you after we've gone through, the next couple of days of market outlooks with the experts to share some of what I've learned with you for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, it does, and I appreciate that. But realistically, just looking at that 23 to 24 number of over 800,000 tons, this is a significant demand from this country when these tariffs are not in place. So I'm sure we can anticipate some big numbers as well. I guess the question being, though, obviously it takes time to make these deals, to move this product, to get this tonnage into India. So, opening up this window means that we've got that shipping season to get it there. Politically, though, and as you've alluded to, India can be a very complicated market for Canada. What is the general sense as far as the relationship right now with trade with India, at least from the Pulse perspective?
From the Pulse perspective, and I could take you back, I think we probably chatted last year at this time about India and about the state of the relationship between Canada and India, and it was perhaps at an extremely low point at that point because we had just heard about the announcement in the House of Commons about the alleged assassination of a Canadian citizen by the Indian government. And so India-Canada free trade talks were shelved at that time. So when I think back to then and fast forward to today and consider everything that's happened in between, I can honestly say that the relationship at a B2B level and at an industry-to-industry level has remained incredibly strong. I mean, we've remained, the lines of communication between our industries have remained open. Of course, the business has continued to flow, so we had a good movement of lentils throughout some of the most difficult times from a diplomatic tension perspective. We had good movement of lentils throughout the course of the fall of last year. And then, in December, as we've been talking about it, we've had the first lifting of restrictions on pea imports in 6 years. So I think, when you consider what impact, when you try to answer the question, what kind of impact has there been on the pulse industry from the tension that we've seen between governments, I would say, the proof is in what's actually happened. The business has actually been done. We have remained in close contact. The relationships at a business-to-business level are strong. And at an industry-to-industry level, we remain in close contact with our partners. And in fact, are hosting a delegation from India, from NAFED of India this week, and we'll be touring them around Canadian farms and taking them to visit some processing facilities, et cetera. So I think, it's safe to say that the things are in a relatively good place between our two industries.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, Craig. I do appreciate this, and I know it is a very busy day, so I appreciate you taking the time. Certainly good news, and we will continue to track what these numbers might look like after you've got a better sense, and we hope that this, of course, continues well into the new year. So, Greg, President of Pulse Canada, thank you so much for joining me here on the show.
Always good to talk to you, Lyndsey. Take care.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with more of RealAg Radio, brought to you by Nufarm, right after this.
At Valtera, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Valtera, we look forward to growing together.
Featuring dual active ingredients NBPT and pronitridine, Tribune provides consistent protection both above and below ground in one convenient formulation. NBPT defends against ammonia volatilization, while the patented second active ingredient, pronitridine, safeguards nutrients from denitrification and leaching. Learn how Tribune can bring greater flexibility and protection to your operation by visiting tribunestabilizer.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and today's show is brought to you by the pre-emergent soil-active herbicides Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ from Nufarm. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds, spray this fall for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control next spring, and find out more about Nufarm products at nufarm.ca. To round out the show today, as promised, I've got a bit of news that we're going to share. Definitely some big dollar figures coming out of an announcement today. And then we'll hop to a clip a couple clips actually from last night's episode of The Agronomist. But first, remember a few weeks ago we talked about GATE? So this is the Cereals Canada plan to build a brand new bricks and mortar building in downtown Winnipeg. Travel back with me to late June, where Cereals Canada announced a vision for a $100 million global agriculture technology exchange. So this would be a new building, a new organization that would be a hub for Canada's grain industry and would promote the use of Canadian crops around the world. So reading between the lines here, this is essentially a modernization and an expansion potentially of what SIGI used to do, and frankly continues to do, just under the Cereals Canada banner after that all amalgamated a few years ago. Anyway, $100 million is a lot of money. And where on earth is Cereals Canada going to come up with this money? Well, at least 13 million and change of it is going to come from producer groups. So we heard today from Alberta Grains, from Saskweet, and from the Manitoba Crop Alliance, and here's how it breaks down. Alberta Grains has committed 4.3 million and change, Manitoba Crop Alliance 2.65 million, and Saskweet 6.2 million and change. So all three of the Prairie provinces have committed a total of 13.1, I believe is the final tally, towards this initiative. We did also get a press release from the Grain Farmers of Ontario that they also supported this, but there was no dollar figure attached. Now, I'll be honest, and we're probably going to talk about this more as the week goes on, and for sure on the issues panel on Friday. I probably am not alone when I say that I was somewhat skeptical that this would even get off the ground. And as Calvin Hepter pointed out, as we heard this news, 13 million is a lot of money. We're not saying it's not, but it certainly isn't the 100 million that GATE is going to need to get off the ground. So we'll be digging into that one further. A few other things, of course, we're following along. In case you didn't hear, the Bloc Québécois won the riding in Montreal, and the NDP won their seat in Winnipeg. What does that all mean for this particular government? Well, we'll find out. Again, we'll talk about that more on the issues panel, but certainly absolutely no red seats won in last night's by-elections. Certainly has a lot of people talking in the political bubble today. All right, let's get to a clip from last night's episode of The Agronomist. We're going to talk micronutrient deficiencies here with Aaron Breimer of Moose Ag and Lyle Cowell of Nutrien. Let's hear that now. So boron. And great comments. Everyone in the chat's reading my mind, is that not only do we have to think about what this crop needs, we have to be able to identify potentially a deficiency, but then we have to think, what do we do? Is it a tissue test? Is it a soil test? Is it both? So perhaps let's talk about identification. We can talk specifically about boron if we want. I know we've got some slides about copper as well. Lyle, maybe I'll start with you. When we're focusing on a deficiency that isn't as clear as, say, one of the macros, what is a decent line of thinking of testing to try and get to the bottom of what's happened?
It's tricky, and micronutrients become, it's a harder topic because there's a lot of micronutrients, and what we know is based on insufficient research in most cases. So we have to be cautious on what we think we know. We talked a little bit about sulfur. Well, we know a lot about sulfur management in Western Canada, and it's a nice, even though it's not a micronutrient, it provides some nice context in. I'm very confident in how to manage sulfur for canola in Western Canada. Micronutrients, there's not a lot of data, so you have to approach management cautiously. I approach the soil test cautiously because in general, the recommendations are not based on enough data to know that I'm going to get a response. Tissue analysis, I would say, is even weaker, to the point that I trust soil and tissue testing to a very short point. I put some good stock in, for example, on the soil test for copper, like that's well-founded. So when it comes to a lot of utilizing soil and tissue tests, I tend to use more the comparative test. Good plants versus bad plants, good areas of the field versus bad areas of the field of tissue or soil tests. Tissue actually tends to be, I think, a little bit more sensitive to deficiency when you're looking at comparative tests. So I often use that just as a diagnostic tool. to determine if in fact it is a micronutrient deficiency at all. And then combining that with, will I get a response? Strip tests across the field to encompass all of the field, the good and the bad of the field, trying to find that maybe 10 or 20 or 30% of the field that actually might be responsive. Because much like most nutrients, but perhaps micronutrients, many micronutrients are especially so very variable across the field. So that combination of just trying to put pieces together of the puzzle to see, first of all, are you going to get a response at all? I think that's the first key.
Mm-hmm. So Aaron, as the data guy, because we know you love it and that's what you work in, that's the language you speak in, to that point, so what role then does having decent mapping, does having decent data at your fingertips for comparative analysis, or where you should soil test, or where you should tissue test, how does that all play into when we're looking at something like a suspected zinc deficiency or suspected boron or something along those lines?
Yeah, so I'm in the same camp as Lyle. It's actually amazing how much of our ground we do not have even what we would consider the bare minimum of a best management practice for soil testing. So when I'm talking to folks and they're hesitant to even get out and do any soil testing or any tissue testing for that matter, the very first thing I say is all you need to do is pull 2 soil tests. One from a high-yielding spot in the field, one from the low-yielding spot in the field. And if they both come back the same, give me a call. I'll take you out for steak dinner because I know that it's not going to come back the same. Then once they come back, now you start talking to agronomists, you start looking at your data, and you start trying to figure out, okay, what is that limiting nutrient? Because quite often you can have some very low levels in some of your best yielding parts of your field. So it becomes a little bit of a detective story, but you need to have that data to start understanding the detective story. And in order to get that data, you really need to be pulling those samples. Someone like me, yeah, I can go on and I can look at historic yield data and say, okay, these are the best spots to pull the test. That said, my experience is every farmer knows where the best part and the worst part of their fields are. They can go out and pull those tests just as quick as I can. Because
I do think that copper deficiency probably does occur, as you said, when it's bad, it's really bad. But I don't know that it's one that many of us see that often. So walk us through the symptoms.
Mix it up with something else.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we often think it's leaf disease or something like that.
So it becomes it has a lot of roles. All micronutrients tend to have a lot of roles within plants. But a couple of significant roles of copper is in the fertility of the flower, in particular the production of pollen. So when you're deficient in copper with wheat, it tends to be a very, very significant issue. So these are pictures I've taken in my career. Upper left, this is from a plot actually of Dr. Molly's, and it's just with or without copper application. This is probably in about the 6th leaf stage. So you see copper does have a role in chlorophyll formation. So you rapidly see severe chlorosis and then necrosis of the deficient plants. The middle picture, a nice picture of what we call whiptailing. It tends to be a pretty good symptom of copper deficiency where the flags kind of get pinched off and twirled into a pigtail or whip, I guess, since we can call it pigtailing or whiptailing, whichever one you want, tends to be a pretty good diagnostic symptom, which can be mixed up with other things. And then the other two, if your wheat looks like the other two mature plants, you're in big trouble. So you'll first of all, copper plays a significant role in lignin production, so you tend to have weakening of the stem below the head, the peduncle, if you want to use the fancy word. So you have that curving of the stem. It's not lodging. It's a fairly empty head. It's not leaning over because it's too heavy. Right. It just has a weak stem. And then on the right picture, You often, when you read about copper deficiency, you hear about melanosis, stem melanosis, or blackening of the tissue, particularly the upper stem. And those wheat heads are empty. Those are at a point of no return and zero yield when you have that symptom. So it is the range of symptoms. You can do something about it early in the season if you start to see some of this sclerosis, necrosis, and you're wondering what's going on. You can still recover a lot of that yield. If you see the symptoms in the other two pictures in the mature wheat, that's something to figure out for next year.
So I think someone suggested that the best answer an agronomist can give is it depends, and I agree. I agree with that 100%. The crop that I would see a zinc response most likely to is going to be corn, maybe a little bit in carrots, but I don't think there's a whole lot of those being grown in southern Manitoba. So we'll focus on corn, and corn. Once you have phosphorus and potash sorted out, and assuming you've got adequate nitrogen, and I'm not saying excessive nitrogen, adequate nitrogen, zinc is going to be that next big one that's going to push your yield. Some of the, going back a few years, but I believe one of the roles that zinc has in early root development is it actually helps the roots grow downwards. So getting those roots to grow down, especially if the ground is cool and wet, like we have in our early corn season, can be a little bit of a challenge. The magic number that I use for zinc is 5 parts per million. I don't see many of those fields, or many of my fields are actually at 5 parts per million. Quite often they're at 2 to 3 parts per million of zinc. But the high yielding corn guys, they have 5 parts per million of zinc or higher. Usually if I see 5 parts per million of zinc on a soil test, I'm almost 100% guaranteed that this is a history of chicken manure, because the galvanized cages, like galvanized steel, is hot dipped into zinc. So that's actually where they're getting the higher zinc. We took some of that, some of those learnings, and we actually started to, and I've never followed this all the way through. So this is another good project for Dave Hooker, is we actually took some zinc oxide, which is not overly available to the plant. So it might be available in however long it takes the zinc oxide to break down. But we actually were using that as a feed supplement to the pigs, and then using the pig manure as a zinc source, and letting the digestive tract of the pigs actually do something to that zinc, whether it's turning it into a true zinc sulfate or if it was just a zinc oxysulfate. We did start to see higher levels of zinc show up in the soil tests after we did that for a couple of years. One of the things that we should throw out there on zinc and all micronutrients, and this comes back to the calcium conversation, Lyndsey, is most micronutrients, they like the lower pH to be more mobile within the soil. So that's one of the reasons why calcium gets tagged as being the bad guy, because calcium's around in higher pHs, which we want, but it also tends to tie up the micronutrients. So that is a bit of a challenge when you look at these micronutrients, is how do you make them available? Lyle was talking about copper and how it can be a foliar treatment. With zinc, quite often it's either a liquid in with the 5 gallons of 624-6, or a couple pounds of something with your dry 2x2.
All right, we're going to end it there because, well, the show's only an hour long and we've reached the end. Thank you, of course, to Nufarm and Valtera EZ and Fierce EZ for sponsoring today's show. Thank you to Amber Bell and Tracy Herbert, to Aaron Breimer and Lyle Cowell, who you just heard, and of course to Courtney Stephenson for our product spotlight, and finally to Greg Cherewyk with Pulse Canada for joining me on today's show. If you have feedback on today's show or anything we talk about on RealAg Radio, give us a call, 1-855-776-6147, or you can drop me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and we'll talk to you Friday for the Issues Panel. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode, brought to you by Brett Young. Check out their new BY7204LL canola with Pod Defender shatter tolerance and Defender rated club root protection. Talk to your local retailer today.